Hey everybody, welcome back to the Man Battle Stations YouTube channel. I'm here in my capacity as a war host with my fancy official shirt here to talk to you about the Hunt for the Prometheus box set. Now, there's been lots of really nicely done opening and unboxing videos for this set already. I'm sure you've probably watched a few before you found this one. So instead of doing the traditional take the box out of the shrink wrap, take the lid off the box, and look at all the stuff in there in real time, instead what I've done is taken a series of photographs of all of the goodies that are inside the box set, and I've made a little bit of a slideshow so that I can have something of a show and tell with all of you, where I'll go through these pictures one at a time and talk to you a little bit about some of my impressions and thoughts on the individual components. This will hopefully allow all of you to take a better stock of what's in the box and get a better feel for what the components are like instead of me trying to manage talking and aiming a camera at the same time. I'm not very good at that. I know lots of people can pull that off, and like I said, there's been some really nice videos for this set done already for folks that can, but I'm not one of them, so this seemed like an easier solution than trying to do it that way. All right, so one final thing before we get started. If you wanted to take a little more time to look at some of the pictures I'm about to show you, I have put up a post on the Man Battle Stations blog where I've got all of the pictures that are in this presentation I'm about to run through, and you can open them up, you can zoom in, you can look at them in greater detail and spend all the time you want on them. So feel free to do that. The link to that blog post will be in the video description below, so please take a look at that if you are so inclined. All that being said, off to the races. So let's start with the rulebook and the campaign book. The rulebook is nice and beefy. It is about 120 pages. Now 40 pages of that is rules, and then the remaining 80 pages is background material. A lot of this background material has already been posted up on the dystopianwars.com website, so you'll be pretty much in the loop if you've read all of that background material up there on the website. But there are still a little bit of some new stuff that's been filtered in here and there, and plus having it all in one place in a printed book is quite handy. The rule book is quite nice. It's got full color printing and all kinds of artwork, as we'll see in a second. The campaign book is a little thinner. The campaign book is only about 8 pages long, and 2 of those pages are a double page artwork spread. But it does have about 4 scenarios in it and a little bit more background material. Now, if you look back at some of the older Spartan campaign books that some of their starter sets came with, this is sort of in line with those to a degree. The Operation Shadowhunter, which was the big 2-player starter set Spartan launched Dystopian Wars 2.0 back in 2014, had something like a 25-page campaign book. However, more than half of that was unit stats, whereas there's no unit stats in this campaign book. So once you cut out the unit stats, it comes right back down to that 10-ish page count for a starter set campaign book. So it's pretty reasonable, and like I said, it gives you some additional scenarios. So let's sort of circle back and talk about the rulebook a little bit more. One of the nice things about the Dystopian Wars 3.0 rulebook is it's got both a table of contents and an index. Yeah, an index, right? So these are 2 things that will go a long way towards making the rulebook a lot more comfortable to use in a gaming scenario. On top of both having a set of contents and an index, you'll also see sprinkled throughout the rules references to other pages within the rules. So for example, if a discussion on page 10 brings up something about a target being obscured, then it will say in parentheses after that sentence, see obscured page 28 or whatever it happens to be. And like I said, you'll see those sprinkled throughout the rules, so that's great. Makes them a lot easier to use, I'd imagine, when you're on the tabletop and you're trying to say, do I round up or round down? Or, does making a model travel submerged make it obscured or have some other effect, and that type of thing. My personal experience, having played Dystopian Wars in the past, one of the big things that tends to slow the game down is trying to find references and look up obscure rules inside the book. It looks like Warcradle's definitely gone out of their way to make that a much easier thing to do in this new edition. And then finally, I did mention artwork. So the rulebook is full color. The pictures here I have don't really do that too much justice, But suffice to say, yes, it is a full-color rulebook. There's lots of artwork in there. Most of the artwork that is featured in the rulebook has been shown elsewhere, either on Facebook or the Dystopian Wars website. So you're not seeing a whole lot of brand new artwork. However, it is still pretty nice to have it in the book, and it's not just a bunch of pictures of painted models, which is sometimes the mode it seemed like Spartan would fall into from time to time. All right, so let's move on from there. Oh, yeah, here we go. This is from the campaign book. Like I said, this is the middle 2 pages of that small campaign book. It's a reproduction of the art spread. Now, this is actually, if I can grab it here and show you on camera, the cover artwork for the box set itself. And so having that reproduced in the rulebook is kind of neat. You would almost frame it if you didn't want to use the book itself. Okay, so let's move on to the printed materials. Inside the box, you also have these 3 sheets of tokens and terrain pieces. What you're seeing here in the tokens are the various damage counters you'll need, as well as the various status tokens you're going to need, things like disorder and so forth. And then you'll see there on the side, you've got a sheet that has these little punch-out icebergs on it, as well as some of the cyborg whales that one of the Covenant ships uses as weapons. The interesting thing about all of these printed materials is they are, in fact, die cut. So, unlike Spartan's older tokens that you had to cut out yourself, these are die cut. They are printed on both sides, and they are printed on a linen-like fabric. So if you've ever played, say, X-Wing or one of other Fantasy Flight's board games, you'll know that the tokens have a very thick cardboard to them and have a almost fabric-like texture to them. And these are very similar. So these are actually very nice tokens. All you got to do is punch them out of the sheet like you see here in this picture, and you're ready to go. Next up, we've got the Victory and Valor card decks. You get 2 of these decks in the starter set because you'll need 1 for each player while you're playing the game. And so if it's a 2-player starter set, you have to have 2 decks of these cards. There's 60 cards in each deck. Those of you that have played the Dystopian Wars 3.0 beta will recognize these cards. Doing a very quick flip through, they look like they're identical or nearly so to the deck that was used in the later stages of the beta. They are printed in color, although they only have 2 to 3 colors on each card, so it's not like they're absolutely screaming with color. But they're very functional. They're very crisply printed, and they're very easy to read, which is more than I can say that compared to the printed out version that I made in order to do the beta testing with. I will say that the cards themselves are basically just cardboard. There is no plastic or wax coating to them. So that gives me some concerns about their ability to shuffle easily and to deal out easily, and also some concerns about their durability. Suffice to say, I'm going to be sleeving my card decks going forward because I want to make sure that they hold up and are usable for a good long time. Dice. Okay, so as most of you are probably already aware, Dystopian Wars 3.0 uses lots of custom D6s. The dice that we're seeing here in this picture, these are the attack dice. These are the dice that you roll to resolve both attacks and defense actions in the game. They have, as you see, 6 unique faces. They are molded in kind of a white pearlescent plastic, and they've got a combination of blue and orange faces on them. And so what we're looking at is from left to right in this picture: blank, defense, a heavy defense, explosion, heavy explosion, and I'm sorry, hit, heavy hit, and exploding attack. So that anchor symbol there is sort of equivalent to the old 6 result in Spartan's days, where that gives you 2 hits and allows you to roll another die. You'll get a total of 40 of these attack dice in the set. So obviously I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but that should be sufficient for most game scenarios. As you start to use more and more models, or as more powerful models are introduced, there's a chance we could top 20 dice needed per attack, but even in Dystopian Wars, having more than 20 dice in an attack was relatively unusual. And of course, if you have 40 dice to split between 2 players, you could always just loan each other dice if you needed more than 20 for a particular attack, I suppose. Anyway, I will say that when I first opened the box and looked at these dice in the bag, they seemed a little chintzy at first, but once I got them out and looked at them, I was actually fairly impressed. I think these will roll quite well. The other type of dice we have are these guys right here. These are the critical hit dice for things like navigation lock, reactor leak, magazine explosion, and the like. These are rolled. You might think at first glance these are like the special order dice from the Battlefield Gothic days, if you remember back that far. That's a little bit of a deep cut, I know. But in that game, the dice actually were essentially markers as opposed to things that you would roll. In Dystopian Wars 3.0, you actually roll these dice. These dice are rolled to figure out what kind of critical hit your model has suffered. And then you can actually use these as markers next to the model to indicate that it's received that critical hit. You get a total of 12 of these, 6 per player. So you don't have nearly as many of these as you do with the attack dice, but that being said, you shouldn't need as many of them in game, so it should work out. Just a quick comparison shot here, so you can see that the critical hit dice are larger than the rolling dice. So those of you out there, I think most of us out there probably use Chessex dice. So the attack dice are equivalent to the smaller size of Chessex dice that come, I think, 36 to the little clear plastic sleeve, whereas the critical hit dice are equivalent to the larger ones where you get 12 in the package. Like I said, both dice actually feel pretty good in the hand. They have some nice heft to them, so I'm reasonably impressed. I've certainly felt cheaper dice in my gaming days from other games. So overall, really well done. And I should emphasize that these special dice aren't required to play the game. You can definitely use a standard D6. It just has the 1 through 6 pips on it. Having these dice does make the game feel a little more thematic, I suppose. And it also means it's a little less thought because you can just look at the dice and see the symbols instead of trying to run through the conversion. The conversion table works just fine. I mean, that's how my friend Matt and I got through all of our games we played of the beta. But having the actual dice with the no-kidding symbols that are looked at in the rulebook, it's sort of a nice touch. It's not bad. Okay, templates. So you have a combination of things here on the sprue. You've got a turning template. You've got a blast template that's kind of reminiscent of the old GW Flamer templates for 40K. And then you have a articulated 10-inch ruler, which is handy. So once you clip all this stuff off the sprue, this is what you wind up with. So here you go with the template for the blast effects there at the bottom. Then above that is the sort of the crescent-shaped turning template. And then above that is the articulated range ruler. So those of you at home might be asking, why 10 inches on the ruler? Well, that corresponds to the range bands that are used in the game. So 10 inches is a handy reference to help with measuring firing ranges. In addition, most models in the game are going to be traveling 10 inches or less, so that 10-inch ruler is also fairly handy for movement purposes, I would imagine. So we'll just have to see how these work out on the table during a game scenario. But overall, I'm pretty impressed. These should paint up pretty quickly without much effort. Probably do a little bit of dry brushing. I'm debating about maybe going with sort of a aged bronze color, maybe trying to give the impression these things are made of bronze or brass, like some sort of ancient nautical navigation tool or something. But we'll see. That's a hobby project for another day. All right, SRS tokens. So this is something that's changed quite a bit. It was not clear exactly from the rulebook in the beta days how these would look. They had sort of an artist rendering, but there was no pictures, there was no real clear diagrams. So this is what you get. What you actually have here is a gray plastic disc that's got the small craft, the little aircraft cast onto the disc. Then that fits into a black base. This is pretty much the same basing plastic that you get for the bases that most models in the industry come with, Games Workshop being first among them. So it's that slightly different grade of plastic than what the model itself is made out of, and it just sits right on there. Now, one thing I should emphasize is that these are quite a bit bigger than the SRS tokens that Spartan used to have. So here's a quick comparison. This is a couple of the old Spartan Tiny Flyer tokens. These happen to be Blazing Sun tokens because that's what I had ready at hand when I was taking the picture. And so you can see that these round tokens are quite a bit larger than the square tokens that Spartan put out, although the aircraft on them are sort of about the same size. And as you can see here, this happens to be the SRS token for the Enlightened. You get several of those in the box, as we'll see in a moment. And the design and the size of the SRS on the token is fairly comparable to what Spartan had originally. All right, so now on to the stars of the show, the models. So this is a quick group shot of the 3 large models you get in the box. There are 3 resin models. You've got the generator ship. That's the one that's all the way over on the left. In the middle, you've got the drone control ship that launches these cyborg whales. And then on the right, you've got the Russian battleship. So I'm going to take a closer look at each one of these in turn. So here we go. Starting with the Russians, this is the battleship. You've got a little almost hat-looking superstructure that goes in that large round area amidships. Then you've got a smokestack section that goes in behind it. Those 3 smaller areas there obviously are intended for turrets. You will use plastic turrets off of the plastic cruiser and frigate sprues to fill those spots out. So those are where you're going to put your heavy gun turrets and other such upgrade weapons. A little quick close-up of the bow here. In general, casting quality on this is really, really nice. I didn't see any major defect. A little bit of flash, as you see here in the picture, but that should be easy enough to clean up with a hobby knife and maybe a little bit of sandpaper. That won't take long at all to clean up. Easily as nice as any of the resin castings I got from Spartan, and better than some. I think most people who have spent a lot of time playing and building Spartan models have run across at least one questionable cast in their time. So fortunately, at least with the ones I got, the casting on these is very nice and crisp with no major defects, no air pockets, no miscast areas, no missing areas, that type of thing. Another shot of the Russians here showing off some of the detail. Very nice. All the rivets, for example, all the way up and down the seams are all there, very crisply done. So that means that they should dry brush very well, which is good for me because I do a lot of dry brushing, especially when I'm building 1200 scale and smaller naval models. All right, so here's the first of our Covenant big boys. This is the, You would think that I would have properly prepared for this, and actually no. All right, so this is the Descartes control ship. There we go. And what is it controlling, you might ask? It's controlling these little whale-like creations that come up out of the center hatch amidships and get loaded into the launch tubes on the side by a crane. Very creative design. A little bit of a quick close-up there. You can see that there's one of those constructs coming up through the hatch amidships. I like big boats, and I cannot lie. This is a very chonky vessel. It's got a lot of beam to it and a lot of width here at the stern. But you can still see, if you look closely, some classic Covenant elements carrying over. For example, the Archimedes screw-style propellers at the back, the ball-shaped energy turrets. So there's still quite a few nods to the older designs of the past. All right, and then finally, this is the Hypatia generator ship. So this is kind of the MacGuffin that is the whole reason for the box set. This is the ship that the Russians are trying to steal. Not the Russians, the Commonwealth. Excuse me, I gotta be very clear about this. The Commonwealth are trying to steal from the Enlightened, and that therefore you're trying to get back. So as you can see, a few drop-on pieces, the bridge, the smokestack, a couple of shields, and then of course a bunch of empty emplacements for weapons and generators. Same things you can see here. To flip back one picture on the Descartes. You got your bridge piece, you got your smokestack that goes in there behind it, and then you've got the weapons emplacements where you can put various ball turrets and the like off of the cruiser and frigate sprue. One thing that was interesting about the generator ship here, at least mine, is it's got some sort of weird black stuff on it. I'm not sure what this is. Back in the early days of Dystopian Wars under Spartan, I did get a couple models that had little bits of rubber stuck in them still from the molds, like down in the nooks and crannies. You had to sort of carefully get in there with a hobby knife and dig them out. That's not what this appears to be. It almost looks like paint, like like a little errant blast of spray paint. I'm not really too worried about it. It doesn't seem to have much of a texture to it when you feel it with your finger. It seems pretty tightly adhered, i.e. it doesn't come off when I scrape it with a fingernail, so I'll probably just primer over it and ignore it. But it's still sort of interesting nonetheless. I'm not sure exactly what step of the production process resulted in this appearance, but there you go. So kind of weird. All right, so here's a quick comparison I did between the Covenant and the Commonwealth. I'm sorry, the Enlightened and the Commonwealth ships. The main reason why I wanted to show this is you can see, if you look at the Commonwealth ship there on the bottom, it's relatively, compared to its neighbor there, narrow and pointy, whereas the Enlightened ship's a lot more, it's a lot chonkier there and a lot thicker around the waist. So interesting that they being Warcradle, of course, have, even in this starter set, gone to a pretty significant degree of differentiation between the two different forces that are in the box, which should help a lot with helping players distinguish them on the tabletop, I think. Okay. Now on to the plastics. So this is the Enlightened sprue that you can use to make their frigates and their cruisers from. So this is a mixture of a small ship and a medium ship sprue. And you can see there on the left, you've got that round disc. That is the SRS tokens. And yes, it is possible to build your cruiser-size ships to be able to launch SRS. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see once we get our hands on the ship stats. A little bit of a close-up there, just showing some of the detail. You're actually looking at the launch ramp for one of the SRSs there in the middle of the frame. So that is, like I said, a really interesting tactical option to be able to launch an SRS from a ship that size. Back in the Spartan days, that was unusual and didn't really come into play until very late in the game's run when we started seeing things like the light carriers and escort carriers coming out. On to the Commonwealth sprue. Now, this sprue should have no surprises for anybody. Warcradle has been doing lots of previews of this. They mailed out a number of these sprues as samples to quite a few folks. I wasn't one of them, but no hard feelings. And so painted up and assembled and painted up versions of these ships have been floating around the various Dystopian Wars communities for about maybe a month or two at this point, all the way back to early December. So like I said, nothing too surprising here. I will say that I was pretty impressed with the casting detail on all of these sprues that I got in the box. You'll see a little bit of fuzziness around the edges. That's just because the macro settings on my camera aren't quite perfect. I don't have the fancy macro lens that you really need to do miniature photography to a professional level. But the center of the frame is clear enough and should give you an idea of the type of things you'll be dealing with. Very, very nice detailing on it. It does have a very good steampunk feel. I think there's lots of pipes that you can paint bronze and gold and all that sort of stuff. I love those kinds of details on my steampunk ships, so yes, I do. Another couple detail shots there showing some of the turrets and some of the superstructure detail pieces. All right, so summary. Now let's take a look at what we've got so far. So just to sort of walk us back for just a second, we talked about all the rule book, the campaign book, the tokens, the dice, other printed materials, and all the models. And of course, all of that, there was some good things and some not so good things. But let's talk about the good things first. You get tons of models in this box set, some 40 models. So you've got the 3 larges, and then you can build the rest as a mixture of the mediums and the smalls off of those plastic sprues. Out of all the printed materials, to me anyway, the tokens stand out as an example of a quality component, something that clearly a lot of time and effort was put into. The rule book is very nice, like I said. I'm super happy that it's got both an index and a table of contents, that it's got full color artwork, that it's got all these great rules references. It is the type of rule book where you could take it to an Office Max or an Office Depot or someplace and have them cut the existing binding off and then spiral bind it in the spine, and so that'll make it able to lay flat. I've done that with a number of my small rule books in the past. Makes it very, very handy when you're sitting tableside and trying to leave the book open to a given rule that you're referencing at that given moment in the game. The only dings I can really come up with on the rule book is that I wish they had a little bit sturdier cover. The cover is a little thin. And also, so I almost wish that what Warcradle had done is that they put out a 40-page rule book and then an 80-page background book and made them two separate books. Now, I get it. That's an additional book. That's additional cost. It's important to try and keep the cost down to make it accessible to as many people as possible. I get all that. Minor quibbles. Overall, it's a great rule book, and I think it's going to be something that I'm using for a long time, even after I get my free Salty Dog edition, just because it's very handy to have at the tabletop, in terms of a book like that. And then you just get loads of great components overall. The turning templates are great. The measuring tool is very nice. I already talked about the tokens. The dice are really well done. And again, you don't have to use the fancy custom dice if you don't want to, but the fact that they're there and make the gameplay a little smoother, yeah, that makes it a win in my book. All right, so what's some of the stuff I didn't like? Well, there's no 3D terrain. So you have terrain in the sense that you have those little punch-out cardboard icebergs. That's not bad. That's definitely usable. That'll get you through your first few games for sure. But, if it was me, I would have loved to have one or two small terrain pieces in there, like a little island or maybe a little like oil rig type thing, or some sort of little bunker or something that could be used as an objective. Yeah, a lot of Spartans boxes include that type of stuff. So that was immediately where my mind went when I saw this box. Minor quibble. The cards do need sleeves to be able to stand up to extended use, at least I feel. But yeah, that's sort of a minor thing anyway. In all honesty, I was sleeving all of my star cards and my tack cards back in the Spartan days anyway, so I'm probably just going to reuse a lot of those sleeves as a matter of fact. So that's not too big of a deal. Campaign book is short. It's serviceable, but it's short, so that's a minor problem as well. And then finally, there are no unit stats in the box. So Warcradle's plan is that when the game fully launches, you'll be able to go up to their website and pull down the unit stats via the Orbats, the order of battle, for the different factions that are out there. So in the case of this box set, you'd have to go up to their website and pull down the Commonwealth Orbat and go up and pull down the Enlightened Orbat. And that's where you'll be able to find the unit stats for the models that are in the box set. This is not a big problem. Pretty much everybody these days has a computer, has a smart device, has access to a printer if they want an actual hard copy. So it's not that big of a deal. In my mind, though, when you think of a two-player starter set, I kind of think of what I like to call the Christmas morning scenario, where you get this cool new thing and you immediately want to tear it open and start getting into playing it. And unfortunately, you can't do that with just the contents in the starter set because the stats aren't there. You don't have the rules that you actually need to play the ships. You've got the core rules, but you don't know how fast your ship moves, or how far the guns shoot, or how many dice you roll when you shoot the guns, that type of thing, with what's in the box. Minor quibble. These are none of these should be seen as showstoppers, right? These are all just little minor nitpicks about this set. So final thoughts. This is a very nice starter set. Despite all that little nitpicky stuff I just pointed out, in terms of the two-player starter sets I've seen over my tenure as a gamer, this one is one of the top ones. This is just packed with good stuff. Because of that, it's a good value. If I go and check right now, and again, apologies for not being better prepared as I sit here and make this video, but if I go and check right now for the cost of this, it's costing £85, right? And so obviously that's your MSRP. And so obviously that's going to be about $115 on current exchange rates. That fluctuates on a daily basis, so don't call me there. But and that's pretty much the going rate for starter sets these days, right? $100 to $120. That's sort of the entry fee for a lot of games out there, and you just get a lot of good stuff in there for that money. So I definitely feel like I got my money's worth when I bought the box set here, and I don't think I would hesitate to recommend it to anybody who's curious about the game. So some other things that are good about it. Well, it's an effective way to get into the game because you've got the cards you need, you've got the tokens you need, you've got the models you need. It's all there in the box. Like I said earlier, it's got everything you need minus the ship stats, which will be available online easily enough pretty soon. All of these specialized components, well, many of them are not, strictly speaking, necessary. We talked about how the dice aren't necessary. You could probably get away without the measuring device. The turning template obviously is kind of required, so that's sort of one you can't get away from. But even so, I imagine pretty quick we'll see third-party equivalents being made out there. Everybody and their brother has a laser printer nowadays, or a laser cutter, excuse me. But it's all there conveniently in one spot for you, and so that makes it an attractive way to get into the new game, right? So overall, highly recommend this box set. This is a set that I'm very happy about. It's a purchase I'm very happy about. And I feel like this is a good way to get the new version of Dystopian Wars off to a good start. I think that Warcradle has a good winner here. And in all honesty, I can't wait to actually get all of the ships put together and get this onto the table. And that is going to be the next thing I work on. And so I'll probably be doing a couple videos about that. And I'll also be doing some videos where I do some breakdowns of the various rules in the rulebook. We'll talk about how those rules work, maybe how they differ from previous editions of the game, and who knows, maybe we'll do a little bit of armchair quarterbacking with tactics here as we go. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. I think this has topped a half an hour. This is a bit longer of a video than I had hoped to make originally, but I thank you for sticking with me to the end. And until next time, good luck and good hunting.